Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, host of the Georgia Voice of College Football show. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you. Everything School HQ. I don't know about all that. Basketball team getting knocked off. What, like the biggest loss of all time by a number one team? What was going on? Everything School HQ. Georgia's over here knocking off top six teams at home, not rushing the floor, which cool. We follow the rules, and the athletic director, I think, awarded the fans some sort of like thing because they didn't rush the floor. I don't know. It seemed lame. You rush to the floor, get the fine. Like, what are we doing? You beat Kentucky. That's my take. That's my 2 cents.
I mean, it was a brutal loss, but Tennessee was also the last undefeated team. And if you look at the history of college basketball, the last undefeated team, it's pretty good. Matt Norlander has a really good piece in CBS Sports about it. The history of the last unbeaten teams in college basketball, and Florida, surprisingly enough, back in the day with Joakim Noah and company, they were the last undefeated at one point and won the national title. So it's a good spot to be in. It's a pretty good hit rate in terms of deep tournament run or a national championship when you're the last undefeated team like the Tennessee Vols are. I mean, it's a bad loss, no question about it. Tennessee just couldn't buy a bucket, and it just got so much worse from there. And the rebounding, this, that, and the other. I will say, though, I thought it was a good pull where the Kentucky player at the free throw line was like, "This is y'all Super Bowl," when I think it was a response. I don't know if it was to Georgia players or the Georgia fans or whatever, but that is such a great, like, look, whatever you think about Kentucky or the rise of Georgia basketball of late, it's like, that is such a great one because you can't say anything to that. Like, this is y'all's Super Bowl because Kentucky sells it out. Kentucky is a big deal. They're just like, it's not, okay, you beat us on the road. Like, all right, or on your home game, this is like y'all's biggest game of the year. Good. I guess that's cool. Like, and it was rocking. I will say this too, though.
Super Bowl line is overused, though. Like,
it's okay. It's a good burn. I'm okay with it. But I will say, I want to get your thoughts. The new court, because I hadn't seen it in action this year, it's terrible. Like the Bulldog outline in the middle is just, there's too much going on. I'm a person who doesn't want a lot going on. My football fields, my courts, all that kind of stuff. Like my jerseys. Just too much. Like, it's too much going on. I don't know how you feel about it or what the pulse of the fan base is. It's terrible.
I like that old school dog logo. They're using a little more these days. But no, I think they're doing too much. I think the color is kind of a little weird, but I kind of like it. It's like some teams kind of do a little, it's not some one of the crazier ones you've seen, like Oregon or something, but I don't know. They're doing a little too much with it. I can feel you there.
I appreciate you joining me on this because it's just something I jotted out. I was like, this is a terrible court. I don't know who approved this one, but they need to start over. Because the new Arkansas one, that throwback in the middle with the Razorback there, the cartoonish Razorback, it's pretty good. I like their court. Florida's court is really good.
I would have liked if they would have just if they'd done this color thing with what they used to have, because they had the G and then the kind of subtle, like, different color wood for like the state of Georgia outline. Like, I think that's cool when schools do that, like the state cutout. I think you see that a lot. But yeah, what can you do?
Hey, what can you do? But yeah, it's a tough loss, but we'll see how Tennessee bounces back. I mean, Texas, all-time bad draw here. Texas is like, this has to be a rarity, but they have the number 1 and number 2 team in college basketball in the same week. Because they got Auburn and got blitzed by them, and I think they came back a little bit, but lose to Auburn, who will probably be number 1 after this week. But then you get Tennessee on Saturday, so you get a pissed off Tennessee team right after a dogfight with the Auburn Tigers, who are probably still the best team in college basketball this season right now. But got to bounce back, Matt Green. Gotta get back up off the mat. But you only can be undefeated for so long in college basketball. I think Tennessee basketball is gonna be just fine.
Yeah, they'll be all right. Not going to the Final Four though.
well, we'll see. Elite Eight this past year, they might go to the Final Four. See, we'll see. Got to get that number 1 seed, and then we'll see what happens. Matt Green, portal activity this week across the board. Tennessee added their second portal edition officially this week in Amari Jefferson, the former 4-star redshirt freshman out of Baylor, not Baylor College, the University Baylor, the high school here in Chattanooga, powerhouse in East Tennessee, multi-sport player. He was a star, baseball star, and football star in the state. He was down to Alabama and Tennessee when he when he committed last year, but no Saban and company, and didn't play this year, so he redshirted after undergoing a hip issue. So he should be ready to go this spring, and really a full-on fresh start. So no idea what you really have there at this point, but still, you get 4 years of eligibility with Amari Jefferson. Talented player, highly sought after, obviously, with a big-time recruiting battle between Saban and Heupel a year ago. And he's another young guy in the fold. He's another young blue chipper that you've added to this room, but the room is loaded with young blue chippers now. Like, the veterans are not there. And Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton and company, we talked about it the last couple weeks on this very program, but I mean, Chris Brazel's your only upperclassman in that room at the moment because of a couple of guys who I wanted the Tennessee Volunteers to target in the portal, ended up in another university that we'll talk about here in a second. But I think Amari Jefferson's a good pull. He's another body. I mean, Brew Carter and Nate Spillman, or Edwin Spillman, excuse me, 3 best Tennessee prospects in their class are now all Tennessee Volunteers. So stacking up some Tennessee blue chippers, and I think he'll compete. I'm curious if he's more of an inside guy, outside guy, based on his size and frame. I don't know if he'll end up being a slot guy or on the outside, but I think Tennessee might need more help on the outside for Jefferson, and we'll see where he factors in. But Mike Matthews, Boo Carter now going to try and play both ways. Braylon Staley, a 4-star South Carolina in this class. You got Travis Smith Jr. coming in, their high 4-star number 1 receiver out of the state of Georgia. Like, Tennessee's they've got some talent in that receiver room. Very young, very unproven, but they've got talent. And hey, Amari Jefferson is another intriguing guy. And we'll see how much he plays and how much he factors in this spring, gets acclimated and ready for this system. But someone that Tennessee really wanted this time last year, and we'll see where he factors in and how quickly he gets the offense down and gets right and everything else. But it's exciting because he's another high school guy that a lot of people saw here locally and wanted to have here on Rocky Top, because local kids thriving and getting kids staying home is always good. So good to have Amari Jefferson back here on Rocky Top. And hey, it's just, I'm not going to pretend to say I know if he's going to factor in this year or not, or how he's going to perform, but you can't go wrong with adding more and more blue chippers into the room. Like, some of these guys are going to break out. Some of these guys are going to hit. Some of them aren't, but you just need to stack as many as you can and see what the competition brings, because there's going to be a lot of young guy competition in this wide receiver room, and it's a lot of talent and a lot of guys who want to get on the field, because it's been a veteran group here over the last couple of years in that receiver room who's gathered a lot of the snaps. That's just not going to be the case this year, because if you look at the portal, there's just not a lot of vets left. And Tennessee, I mean, I think it's going to be a youth movement at receiver in 2025, and it's a big year for their eval. So the eval's got to hit, because these are your own guys that you've recruited over the last couple cycles, and hopefully they hit. You retain Mike Matthews, you bring in Amari Jefferson, like Braylon Staley's a big name, and you get Travis Smith, like I said. Like, it's a lot of talent, but it's a lot of young talent, and they got to go, because it's a big year for Nico and big year for the Vols here in 2025 to get this offense and particularly this passing game right next season.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of fans were also hoping that, like, hey, Amari Jefferson, that'd be cool, but let's get some other guys. Let's get some vets who are in there, like a Noah Thomas or a Zachariah Branch, and some big namers who have proven, more so Noah Thomas than Zachariah Branch, production at the college level. But, just more veterans in the room. And this is like Georgia did both. Like Georgia, I've talked about it on this program this week here, Matt Green, that Georgia kind of has had the offseason at receiver that I wanted Tennessee to have, which is very frustrating because I think both needed to completely revamp their receiver room. Both programs were not happy with the production at receiver this year. Both programs weren't happy with how the offensive line ultimately fared this year. And that's Kirby and company did it a little bit differently. They added obviously a 5-star receiver in Taylor and a lot of blue chippers behind him, Thomas Blackshear and company too. But they didn't just add a bunch. They didn't just retain Nitro Tuggle from entering the portal. They also went out and spent big and added 2 big names alongside who knows what happens with Colby Young next season. But Noah Thomas, Texas A&M player who's been really productive for them the last couple of years, along with Zachariah Branch and his brother Zion coming in from USC. So Georgia adds 2, I would assume, 2 day one starters for the Dawgs, and that receiver room is night and day what Georgia fans saw this past year. So if I'm Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi, I'm pretty excited about how the Dawgs have handled this offseason at the receiver position. What say you?
Yeah, I think you got to be. I think Kirby Smart has a trend of this, of like saying like this is what the team needs, and then immediately going and making it happen. And Georgia had to get better in the receiver room, and Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas are pretty huge. Like, obviously, we're not going to speculate with Colby Young. Like, that's another guy that could be an addition to this team in 2025 as well. That basically wasn't a part of the team the last 8-9 games of the season. But you add all these guys in. Obviously, Arian Smith is gone. Dominic Lovett is gone. It's like, I think Georgia should be able to get an upgrade at that position. And then Zion Branch, obviously, with Georgia losing, like Georgia played 3 safeties. Like you saw Malachi Starks play a lot of the star this past year. Like maybe it's Jonel Aguero, and maybe you only need one other safety opposite KJ Bolden. But Georgia brought in Zion Branch, like I said, Adrian Maddox, the UAB safety who committed to Florida out of the portal, but then ended up signing with Georgia. So he ends up in this class. And then am I forgetting another safety? I think that Georgia signed
Miami kid.
Yeah, Jaden Harris. The Miami safety. So that room is going to look a lot different too.
It's interesting because they like the Maddox thing we talked about, where I was kind of surprised that he didn't end up at Georgia because that's a position in need, and it seems like that would have been an obvious fit for them, and they end up flipping him anyway. So it seems like he's probably a starter next year for Georgia. I think it's a position of need for them, and the receivers, there's gonna be so much competition because some of these young guys are gonna want to play. Like we're gonna see how Taylor factors in. Nitro Tuggle stuck around, talented guy. Like he's gonna factor in. Dylan Bell's back. Also, his brother transferred.
Yeah,
in.
Micah Bell.
Yeah, so he's back. Maybe a surprise to me was Trevor Etienne. I think is back. Right? Has that been announced, or is that just kind of where things are trending?
Yeah,
is that official?
Trevor Etienne said he's coming back.
Are you excited about that? Or were you kind of like...
Absolutely. I think Trevor Etienne, was the best playmaker on Georgia's team in 2024 when healthy. So I think, the offensive line is a huge, factor because you're losing 4 of your 5 starters on the offensive line. But you do have guys who played a lot of football still on that offensive line. So, it wasn't great this year. So, losing 4 starters, you could say it's going to be worse, or it's like, well, lose 4 out of 5 on an offensive line that wasn't very good. Maybe it gets better. It could kind of go either way. You expect Georgia to just not have an offensive line as bad as it was this past year. But I say that to say that's a huge factor in the running game, obviously. But I mean, you look at Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier in the backfield, like, I'm not sure how many teams in the SEC have a better running back duo than those 2 in 2025. Like, I think that's, and obviously if Georgia had so many injuries at that position this year, like if some of those guys, Roderick Robinson, Branson Robinson are like 3 and 4, Cash Jones, like Georgia's got suddenly a lot of depth at that running back position.
Yeah. That's fair. I mean, Georgia's active, man. They've hit the ground running in the portal, but we have to talk about the biggest one. And I don't. This is one that I don't think Georgia has a. This was surprising because Damon Wilson figured to be a starter and play a lot of snaps and play a big role for the Dogs at the edge spot next year. Because Chaz Chambliss can't come back, right? He's out of eligibility, I think.
Yeah, Chambliss is gone.
So what do you do there? So Damon Wilson, it looks like maybe he's on his way to Ohio State. We'll see where he ultimately ends up. But that's where it seems like the smoke is right now. But does seem to be trending away from him staying with the Dogs even after entering the portal, because we've seen that in time or two, guys entering the portal and then returning to their team. Doesn't seem like that's where it's going with Damon Wilson. But how big of a loss is this for Georgia in 2025?
Yeah, I think it could be huge. I mean, he essentially was a starter this year. Like he essentially played starter level snaps. So you lose him. Like Jalen Walker was obviously kind of a hybrid inside outside linebacker, but a lot of the damage he did was as a pass rusher. So you lose him. You lose Chaz Chambliss, like you said. Like Damon Wilson, I expected. He kind of came on, I think, as the season went on. Like I expected him to be Georgia's best pass rusher coming into 2025. So I know Ohio State was one of the teams that he was, down to coming out of high school, and he ended up taking Georgia. He was like top 10 player in the country, I think, coming out. And you were finally starting to see some of that, why he was a 5-star this year. So that's definitely a disappointing one. I'm not sure where Georgia goes from here. There is one aspect that in Georgia's recruiting, like they love versatility in that linebacker room. So a lot of these inside linebackers, quote unquote, on their roster are blitzing off the edge and doing all kinds of different things. So, I mean, you've seen the way that linebacker room has been recruited in the last few years, like with CJ Allen, with Raylan Wilson, with Troy Bowles that just transfer, but Justin Williams, Chris Cole, like you've seen a lot of versatility out of guys like that. So, that doesn't, it's Georgia. So, you tend not to worry that they're going to have guys at those linebacker spots, but there's not a proven pass rusher now on that roster. Like a Gabe Harris is probably an edge rusher that played the most that's coming back from this roster. And there is a history of the last few years of a couple of Georgia guys going in the portal and then ending up deciding to stay at Georgia. So, he hasn't committed anywhere yet, but you've seen a crystal ball to Ohio State to this point. So, that would definitely be a big loss if they lose Damon Wilson. When with what they're already losing in that defensive front, because Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker both decided to go pro early, and then Terry and Ingram Dawkins, who is one of Georgia's more consistent, like disruptive and interior linemen, is also gone, along with Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson. So you're going to see a lot of new faces in Georgia's front seven next year.
So what do you do? Is there anything you can do?
No, man, this is the portal. You try to recruit the best players you can. Like this is what it is now. Like it's just timing is the key to life. Like Kirby was over here doing exactly what Saban was doing, and Saban didn't have to worry about those guys, second, third string future NFL players transferring. He could just stack them up. Just stack his decks one year after the other. And another guy like Samuel Mpemba was a 5-star this past year as a true freshman. Didn't really get on the field at all, but he's transferred after 1 year. So, it's really interesting to see what Georgia does. Isaiah Gibson was the number 1 edge rusher coming out of high school, but, I never like to necessarily rely on a true freshman. I want the true freshman to just kind of be a bonus to what you already have.
It's kind of like one of those, I wonder if Samuel Mpemba leaves if he knows that Damon Wilson leaves.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Who knows? The guys have so many different reasons for leaving, you never know.
But the timing does matter. I mean, this happened at Tennessee where Tobe Awaka and Jonas Adu, and for Tennessee, 2 bigs who ended up transferring. But it was one of those where Tobe was a surprise. Jonas was less of a surprise, but it's one of those if like they had entered the way they entered the portal timeline wise, like you wondered if one of the guys had gone in before the other, would the same situation have played out the same? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like one of those where you're like, I wonder if they just waited a little bit longer or they'd seen this, then it would have cleared the deck here. And I just wonder for Georgia if Damon Wilson being the first one out would have maybe helped things in terms of just what this edge situation was going to look like.
At the same time, if you're a guy who's going in the portal prior to the playoff, I think you had your decision made up like pretty early. You know what I mean? Like because there's those guys as soon as the SEC championship is over, it's like, oh yeah, he's transferring. And so
let's do this then. Of the three options here, tell me which one you think is most likely game one for Georgia. Freshman, Isaiah Gibson, internal guy right now, or transfer is the day one starter at edge for Georgia next year?
I would probably say transfer. Just because I know I saw the guy from South Dakota.
Yeah.
Mikeese Grace, I think is his name.
Highly productive, I think. I was going through his stats.
Yeah, so the fact that you've already kind of heard about an edge rusher that Georgia's maybe targeting, but obviously there's multiple guys. And I mean, half the time, Georgia's playing different fronts, like a 3-3-5 sometimes. So it's not like it's always just that typical 3-4 with like a DeMarcus Ware on the outside. But it's I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like that. And another guy, like I said, Gabe Harris, like that was a guy who wasn't as highly ranked as like a Samuel Pimba or something, but he got on the field a lot quicker. So, sometimes the 5-star is just, an incorrect rating for a guy coming out of high school and he ends up somewhere else.
That's fair. All right, Matt Green. Well, let's dive into our burning questions here for the college football playoff. We have here, as folks are listening to this on a Thursday morning, we're here, man. We got the college football playoff is back here to Thursday and Friday. Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State. We're down to the final four here, Matt Green. Some burning questions before we dive in and just kind of make our picks into how these two final games are going to go, sir. My first question to you, though, which is the better bet to be close? We've had a lot of blowouts here in the college football playoff thus far. Texas was obviously just in a close barn burner. Penn State, I guess it got close a little bit late with Boise. Ohio State has not played a close playoff game of late. And Notre Dame, I guess we could say is close. Kind of got away from the Dawgs in the second half, but still relatively close. It didn't feel like a blowout.
It was a competitive-ish game.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It never felt in doubt, but it was not like a blowout. So it was just like one of those weird things in the second half. Like once the 17-0 run in a minute happened, you're like, oh, I think this might be too much. But Matt Green, which one do you think is the better bet to not be a blowout?
I think you got to go Notre Dame, Penn State, just because the offensive firepower is not the same as the other side. I feel like when there's a lot of offensive firepower, like that's when something can get out of control, especially when that team with the big time offense gets a turnover or something like that. So it feels like your classic Big Ten. Like this is why Notre Dame should have joined the Big Ten years ago. They're a Big Ten school in their veins. But yeah, it just feels like it's a 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of game. Especially like a throwback game. Like Riley Leonard's just gonna be playing like that halfback, like tailback role that people played back in like the 40s. Just direct snaps, taking it himself, 80 yards passing. I don't know. I think it could be a rock fight.
The thing to me, I could see Notre Dame pile driving Penn State. Like nothing about Penn State has me just completely sold that Notre Dame won't just bounce them with relative ease. I think there's a lot more potential to me where Texas can snap out of their issues because, I mean, they just can come back so quick. Like Arizona State had them on the ropes late and it felt like Texas, it was over. And Texas just, they find a way. Like they don't go away. And part of it's the talent. Like they're an extremely talented team. I think that's one of the more interesting things to me about these two in terms of what's more likely to be a blowout is like I think more people expect Texas, Ohio State to be a blowout. But I just look at this and I'm like, these are maybe the two most expensive rosters in college football this year. I mean, Sark has nothing to lose here. I think this is one where Texas's defense is legitimately really good. I think Ohio State's defense is legitimately really good. I would be surprised if this game is not the better game between the two. I think Notre Dame, I lean more. Notre Dame has a bigger margin of victory than whoever wins the Ohio State Texas game. And I feel like that's not the general sentiment nationally right now.
No, not over here.
Texas has a Georgia problem. Like, that to me is like their problem, is Texas has a Georgia problem. I don't know if they necessarily have an Ohio State problem. Like, I think there is a path. I mean, Texas also curb stomped Michigan, who beat Ohio State. Like, I think people are really leaving Texas for dead here. And I think I understand why you would lean towards Ohio State winning this game, but I would caution people to err on the side of Texas is a fraudulent team and they're about to get shown why by Ohio State, who's blown out their last two teams in Tennessee and Oregon. I think this is a more complete team, and I think this is the most legit defense Ohio State has played since Michigan. So we'll see. We'll talk more about it here in a second, but I don't know. I think the more likely blowout is Notre Dame Penn State.
Okay. Next question.
First time CFP champ, no matter what here, sir. Of the four, it's kind of wild that we're going to have a first timer here. Of the four, who do you think is like the best story? Who are you going to be like, I'm glad, like, good for them. Like, the first time champ. Who do you think is the best, like, hey, who's the most likable first time champ of the four?
Interesting. So you got, obviously, Marcus Freeman is the best looking, right? I think everyone knows that. And then he's got like the narratives on his side. He's a family man. He's got all the kids, and he converted to being a Catholic and all that. And he's the assistant coach that became the head coach that all the players love and everything. And Notre Dame, they have the longest drought, right? What's Penn State's last national title? It was like 90. I was thinking like 92 or something, like 90. No, I think they had a really good team in 94. I don't think they won the national championship. What is
86 and 82 is all I see right here.
Okay, so 86. So Penn State does have the longer drought. So the longer drought is always a good story, but Notre Dame's right there at 88 was their last title. So feels like Marcus Freeman is kind of the one America is rooting for, even though Notre Dame is typically like the Dallas Cowboys of college football, that America's most liked team and also America's most hated team.
It is curious. I do tend to, I think Penn State has that too. I think whoever wins Penn State, Notre Dame is going to be where most national folks or most of America roots for in the national title game. I don't think the national folks are going to cheer for Texas or Ohio State to win the national title.
No, I don't. I'm with you there.
I think the best story is probably Ryan Day. Like, I think because just the dude can't get past the Michigan thing. Like, he wins so many of his regular season games. He's been really dominant. He came really close against Georgia, a much better Georgia team a couple of years ago, obviously in that awesome game, and it doesn't end well for them. But I just think the bounce back of like just left for dead after that horrible Michigan loss for the fourth year in a row, where everyone thought it was over, where it's just like the fan base is like, we're out. I don't know. I think you like stories like that where it's like, nope. Instead of wilting under the pressure and being under the microscope here, he was like, we're going to play the best game of the season against Tennessee, and then we're going to pile drive Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Even worse. I don't know. If he beats Texas, that's a great run. 2 SEC victories along with the best team in the Big Ten. I don't know. I think Ryan Day, because he seems like a nice guy. Like Ryan Day just seems like people just really pile on this dude because he inherited a great situation in Columbus. But I would also posit Marcus Freeman inherited a great situation in Notre Dame. Like, Brian Kelly left that thing in really good shape, and I think
nowhere close to Ohio State.
Urban
I think
Meyer,
close.
Ohio State. You can't say nowhere close. Notre Dame's still recruiting at an elite level. He left it in a good spot. Brian
in a
Kelly
very
left.
good spot. Ohio State was at a different level. Ohio
I'm
State's
not
up there with
disagreeing that
Alabama.
it's higher, but I don't think it's like that egregious to be like Marcus Freeman walked into a very good situation.
No,
at
not
Notre
at all.
Dame.
Yeah, he definitely did.
All that being said, I think Sark, it's interesting because I feel like Sark he doesn't get a lot of credit. Like Falcons fans didn't love him as his OC, even though he was pretty solid. USC fans don't really claim the Sark years. Like he was solid there. UW, he got UW back from the dead, which feels like forever ago. He won there. Then goes to USC, and he ends up Bama. He's really good as an OC at Bama. I don't know. I think he's kind of like a cool, like on the fringe figure that people just don't really completely buy into as a national champion coach.
See,
so I don't know. He'd be a cool
dis-
story.
I don't think anyone dislikes Sark. I think it's Texas is like your neutral fans don't root for Texas. It's like it's just something about Texas is so polarizing. Like I think it's just like I don't know. They're kind of like they think they invented football type of stuff, you know? Like I don't know. I think there's not a neutral like charm about Texas. I don't think.
Interesting. I don't know. I'll say
Other
this.
than Matthew McConaughey, so that could sway a lot of people.
I think Penn State's the only not like great story if they win to me, because they had this easy road. The all time, and it's going to lead into another question we have here, but I don't know. Like, I guess it's cool if they were to ultimately do it. Depends on who they beat, like in the title game. If they were to beat Texas or Ohio State, they get vindication over the Buckeyes. That could be something. But of the four, it seems like the less you're just kind of like the Penn State winning would be kind of funny in a way where it's what we've been saying on this program when they expanded to 12 and eventually to 14, 16, whatever they finally get to, is that you're going to have, we said that like you're going to have some years where the best team from the beginning, the best team at the beginning of the year, and we feel at the end of the year, it feels like the best team won the national title. That will still happen. It just won't happen every year like it used to. It's kind of funny if the first year we do that, because no one will say at the end of the year, if Penn State wins it all, Penn State was the best team in college football this year. No one will believe that. No one will feel that that was the case. So I feel like Penn State's kind of in a lose-lose, because I don't think, even if they win the national title, like Penn State fans like raise the banner, it's a title forever. But I don't think college football fans will see them as the best, and they'll be used as like, see what happens when you expand the playoff. We have like the fourth best Big Ten team winning the championship because they got a great draw. Like I feel like Penn State's kind of in a bad spot here.
I mean, that's a fair point. I was going to say the same thing about Ohio State. Like in terms of like you were talking about all the negativity and being left for dead. It's like they were being left for dead because they kind of were dead. Like in most years, Ohio State loses their second game, misses the Big Ten title, season's over. So it's like we changed the rules this year, and it's like, oh, actually they're the best team. It's like, do we like that story? Is that a good story? We kind of just a year that Ohio State was really underachieving. We put them in the tournament and they won the national championship.
That's fair. I'm curious I would like a poll on that. Storyline that has your interest the most here in the final two games, Matt Green. What's the storyline that has you most intrigued?
First of all, what you said of just the fact that somebody's going to win their first national title is a pretty cool storyline. But yeah, I think Ryan Day is probably the most interesting storyline. Like I was just talking about, like, he's talked about like he can't beat Michigan, and that's like we were leaving him for dead and all that, and like it feels like a gladiator moment. Like if they win the national championship, like are you not entertained? Like we can't beat Michigan, we just won a national championship. Is that good enough for you people? Like I don't know. So I think the Ryan Day aspect to all this is just kind of funny.
If you're Ryan Day, do you win it all and then go, all right, I've had enough. Off to the Bears.
Cowboys. Yeah,
like
Bears.
I don't know. Like what do you do? Do you capitalize because you're like, that wasn't really fun? Like, because everyone cares about ultimately beating Michigan. Like that's all, like not being able to beat Michigan is so important. But it's also like you lost last year to the national champs in Michigan. There's no shame in that. And
can you go out on 4 straight to Michigan though? Like, can you really leave? Like, that's
Michigan.
You won a national
year,
title. Though. It's funny. Like, we're talking about like going off 4 straight losses to Michigan, but you did win. Your last game would be winning a national title. So I don't know. I've always said, like, I was never going to die on the hill defending Ryan Day, but like, I still thought he was one of the best coaches in all of college football. But if they wanted to fire him, like, who am I to tell you losing to Michigan 4 years in a row isn't worth firing? If that's what you guys feel, do your thing.
I guess. Coach under the most pressure to win it all, Matt Green.
So I'll put mine in order, and then I'll explain. So I have James Franklin, number 1, Ryan Day, 2, Sarkisian, 3, Freeman, 4. James Franklin is without a doubt under the most pressure because, like, it's good for them and like vibes at Penn State. Like, they're in the semifinals, they're in the Final Four, but they still haven't really answered any of the questions we've all had about Penn State. Like, the only question is, can you beat the elite teams? And they're in the Final Four, and they've yet to beat an elite team this year. And is Notre Dame an elite team? Like, I'm not sure. They could get to the national championship, and you'd be like, yeah, Notre Dame's that consistent, like, top 10 team. They're not elite of elite. Like, maybe you might still have that feeling. You could be wrong. But, and then you go up against Ohio State in the national championship and you lose. And then it's like, what did we really learn about James Franklin other than that he's better than basically everyone he plays, except for when he plays the very best in the sport, typically Ohio State, and he just can't beat them.
What if he beats Notre Dame and then loses to Ohio State? Are you still like, what is the narrative there?
I mean, it is still a massive win if he beats Notre Dame. Like, that'll be the biggest win of his career. But I think you'll still have that, like, oh, how good was Notre Dame though? You know, they lost to Northern Illinois and all that. You know, like they don't have the typical blue blood roster. Like, they're recruiting top 10. You know, but it's like the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world. You know, they're typically on another level. Michigan, I guess. Michigan's probably recruiting at a similar level as Notre Dame, and those teams are just consistently beating Penn State. They beat everyone else except for those teams. So Notre Dame, whether you want to count them as one of those teams, it would definitely be the biggest win of his career. So that's definitely something to hang your hat on. But man, it would be frustrating if it still ends with a loss to Ohio State.
I mean, I agree with you. I think James Franklin is not really close to me. Because the draw, like it's there. It's not Penn State's fault that they got the kind of draw they did, but the draw is the narrative with them is, yeah, y'all made it through. But I mean, Tennessee would be at the spot if they had Penn State's draw. Penn State got a great draw. They don't have to apologize for it, but that means there is a lot more scrutiny. That means what Ohio State's done to this point is not the same as what Penn State's done. Ohio State drubbed 2 really good teams. No offense to Boise. They would have all 3 of those. They'd have wins over Tennessee, Oregon, and Texas if they didn't win the national championship. It's just not the same as the Penn State path. I would also just say, as a whole, the pressure is on that side of the bracket because Notre Dame, I don't know if we'll ever get this kind of situation where they get Georgia without their starting quarterback and limping into that game as they did. And one of the weaker Georgia teams we've seen in a long time under Kirby. So a lot went right for Notre Dame too. Like, Notre Dame got a really nice draw. That bottom of the bracket is just where you wanted to be. So I think there's pressure on Freeman and Franklin together because I have a hard time believing they're going to have that same luck of the draw in the next year or two. So you just never know. We always like to believe we're going to get back and we're going to do this and that. Like, if you're Texas, like, you're preseason number 1 next year with Arch and company. Like, it's fair for Texas, the way you spend and everything else, that you'll be back. Now look, you're in the Final Four, so you want to take advantage and like see what you can do here and close out strong. But if you're Texas and you lose close to Ohio State, guess what? You're like, all right, we're going to be preseason number 1 next year, and we can easily get back. We might get a better draw. But if you're Franklin or Freeman, you don't know that. You might be in that side of the bracket next year, and you get bumped in round 1 and bounced, and you're like, wow, we may have missed our moment 2 years ago.
So So you're putting Freeman number 2.
I'm putting Freeman number 2 because I think these two coaches, like this is just such an exceptional draw that you got to capitalize on this, man. Like I don't know, you know what I mean? I just think it's such a great draw for them.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point because this could be like the best chance you're ever going to have to win the national championship.
Yeah.
Whereas Ohio State, they don't win it this year. There's like a 50-50 chance they're in the national championship again next year.
Texas too.
Yeah, and Sarkisian and Texas, I don't know why. What is it? It's like year 5 or something now, right? For some reason, it doesn't feel like Sarkisian's really under any pressure at all. Like,
no, he made the playoff last year. He's in it again this year. I mean,
but it's also a very like they've proven so little really this season. So it's interesting that there's no real pressure around because like the best wins they have are A&M and then Arizona State and Clemson like in this playoff. So, and those weren't exactly blowouts like some of these other playoff wins were. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting that I don't know. People are there's just good vibes in Texas right now. They're feeling good. It feels like no one's really given them much of a chance to beat Ohio State. And it's always dangerous when no one's giving someone a shot.
I mean, he's 38-16 overall at Texas. He's in his last 2 years in particular, he's 25-4. So I mean, he's putting up Ryan Day stats right now at Texas. So I think it's just kind of, I don't know. I think Texas, things are going really well. And it's taken a long time. We've had the fake Texas is back stuff, obviously with Texas, Georgia years ago with Sam Ehlinger and company. And you're like, Texas was not actually back. And we've had moments where it feels like they might be, and then it's gone. So it does feel like Texas is the most back they've been since the prime Mac Brown era. So I think that's why there's no real pressure there. You're like, let's not rock the boat here. Like Sark's got this running pretty well. And your coordinators are great with Kwiatkowski, or however you pronounce his name, the UW former coordinator, who's their coordinator, is elite. Like he hires extremely well, obviously recruits extremely well, and they win majority of the games they should.
And that's fair, but they could also be a window team too. Like they could, like the SEC is a gauntlet. And how many times are you going to get a schedule as easy as Texas has gotten this year? Like obviously next year
they will.
Is going to be similar. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's some tough schedules in the SEC, and I imagine Texas's will get more difficult. Like last year, getting Washington a close loss, like maybe that's a missed opportunity, and then who knows what happens this year.
I just think no matter what, these two, it's got to be Freeman or Franklin. You got to take advantage because I just don't think you're going to get a better draw on this.
Franklin's got that unfortunate Kirby kind of pressure of like you get all the way to the national championship and you still might have to beat that team that's bullied you over and over again.
Yeah, I think so. What about the games themselves, Matt Green? Texas, Ohio State. Who do you think ultimately wins and why?
I think you laid out exactly the type of demographic I'm coming from, of the people who just have. I've personally been one of the more critical people of Texas all season, and I'm just not impressed with their resume. Like I was just saying, like of the 4 teams left, like they've played by far the 2 most competitive first 2 playoff games. Like, and you could argue that Arizona State should have beaten them with the way that game played out. But I've talked about it all year. Like I've questioned how good Georgia was all year. The best team Texas played twice, and they lost to them twice. And it's honestly, it's some of the best Georgia's looked all season was against Texas. And it's hard for me to ignore those games. And you just look at what Ohio State did, jumping up 21-0 on Tennessee, jumping up 34-0 on Oregon. I just think this is the best team in college football, and there's just like nothing stopping them right now. Like I think Texas, I'm not going to say exposed, like they're fraudulent, but I do think there's to an extent they've been overrated all season long. And I think there's a chance Ohio State, this is like a legit blowout. Like I could see another like jumping up 14-17-0 in this one. And Texas has the firepower to like that Tennessee doesn't have, to like maybe go down 21-0 and get back in the game and make it competitive. But I think Ohio State wins this game by at least 2 touchdowns. Like I think I'm saying like a 38-24. I just don't think there's any stopping this offense. Like you saw what Cam Scatterboot did by himself last week against this Texas defense. Like if Texas is going to win, it has to be the defense forcing turnovers, like shutting down the run. And this secondary has been really good this year. You got the Thorpe Award winner. You got Mkumba, I think if I'm pronouncing his name right. I don't think I am, but you know who I'm talking about. The Clemson transfer. Mm-hmm. But Ohio State, they just have too much firepower, honestly. I think Jeremiah Smith, like we always talk about, like he's the best receiver in college football. I think there's no keeping this offense under like 35 points.
I mean, this is, I think, like I said, I think this is the best defense Ohio State's played in the playoff. It is interesting. S&P Plus has Ohio State and Texas number 1, number 2 in defense nationally. I think Texas's defense keeps them in this game. The problem is Ohio State's complete, and Ohio State's offense is elite. They're rolling and clicking on all cylinders. I just don't think Texas's offense, the Quinn Ewers stuff, it's so weird. It's just I don't trust this Texas offense. Like they're you look through different things, like they're 3rd nationally in net yards per play. Ohio State's 1, Ole Miss is 2, Texas 3 at 2.21. It just doesn't feel like it. You look at the stats and you're like, what am I missing about this Texas offense? Because the numbers aren't terrible. They're 13th in opponent adjusted efficiency, but Ohio State's number 2 and number 1 is Oregon, and Oregon got crushed by this Ohio State defense. So I worry about what this Ohio State defense is going to do to this Texas offense, because I just think it's weird. Like they show up. I mean, Golden has really shown up. Like he has turned into a big time receiver and has a great connection with Quinn Ewers. I think he has to have a huge game for Texas in this one. How will Texas be able to run the football? And how will their offensive line ultimately hold up against this Ohio State front? I don't know. I just, my gut is this is close. My gut is this is the close one, and the Notre Dame one is a double-digit win. But we'll get into it here in a second. But Quinn's got to have a great game. This is the ultimate, like, Quinn Ewers, man. Like, the Quinn Ewers experience could come to an end here with Arch in the fold next year. So you got to go all out. I have no idea what to make of Quinn Ewers. Like, he's just such a wild card in the spot. Like, does he have just a great showing and shows why he was the number 1 overall player in his class and why he was a 5-star and
playing with a chip on his shoulder against his former team?
Yeah, like I don't know. My gut is Ohio State wins, but I do think this is close. So I'll go Ohio State 34, Texas 31.
I don't know if I gave a score. I'm saying Ohio State 38, Texas 24.
Okay. What about Notre Dame, Penn State? What say you? I feel like I know we're going to be on different aisles here.
You think so? I think this feels like a classic Big Ten game, like I was saying earlier. I think and Abdul Carter, I think, is expected to play in this one, which is pretty huge. I think Riley Leonard has to do something in the pass game. Like, I know this team is gritty and they run the ball well, and Riley Leonard gets tough yards and everything, and they shorten the game, possess the ball and all that. I think if Penn State's defense plays like Georgia's defense played, then Penn State wins this game. I think Georgia playing with a backup quarterback, it was just a mess, honestly. Like, they couldn't get anything going. Like, I think Penn State's had a better run game all season than Georgia. I just think and you know me, I'm not even a Drew Aller guy. Like, I don't really believe in this Penn State offense. They put up big numbers when they're playing everyone except for the elite teams. But like Ohio State earlier this year, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. I don't believe that with Riley Leonard having 90 passing yards, I don't think that Notre Dame can beat Penn State that way. Also, Penn State's defense has been better than Georgia's defense this year. So I think I trust Penn State to win this game. I'm going to take Penn State 21-20. Penn State gets it done.
Yes, we disagree here. Whatever I feel about Quinn Ewers, times that by 10 with Drew Aller. I just I don't love the Drew Aller experience. And now that you don't have Bo, who's now off to Mizzou as their QB1 for 2025, and those packages they had for him, that helped them. Boise State came back in that game. There was a couple plays where you're like, ooh, that could have been really interesting down the stretch here. I just don't think Penn State's legit. I think Notre Dame is battle tested. They're beat up here a little bit. Jeremiah Love is going to play though. This Notre Dame front, I think, is going to give Drew Aller problems. I don't think Drew Aller is going to handle the pressure that Notre Dame is going to bring him in this football game. I think Penn State has not really been tested in the way that Notre Dame just has, and I think it's going to benefit Notre Dame that they just beat Georgia. They slayed a big-time juggernaut, and Penn State's had a relatively easy here's the difference. Like the Notre Dame front seven, it's gonna be a little bit different than Boise. Boise blitzed a bunch, and that's kind of their thing, is they live and die with their heavy blitz. But like that's not what Notre Dame's gonna be doing. Notre Dame is going to be a physical, aggressive, and they're gonna keep this low scoring. And I don't think the deep plays and the deep shots from Penn State are gonna happen in this game against Ohio.
Doesn't that sound like Penn State football right there? Keeping it low scoring, no offense.
But here's the thing. I think Notre Dame's going to score. Like, I think Riley Leonard's going to run the ball. Like, I think Riley Leonard is going to pick his spots. I think he's going to be able to do a little bit. Because, like, we don't know what would have happened with SMU. I mean, that was just kind of like Kevin Jennings kind of imploded here with the picks. And Madsen obviously struggled too for Boise. But my gut is Riley Leonard in this offense, they know who they are. And it's a comfortable identity. They throw when they have to, they run when they have to, but they lead throughout. Like they're just so good at starting well. Their special teams is elite. Like we might have another kick return for a touchdown here in this game. That's very much a possibility. I trust Notre Dame special teams a lot. I don't trust Penn State. I think Penn State's like 67th in special teams and S&P plus. So I think you give the benefit of the doubt to the Fighting Irish here. But Notre Dame, I mean, they're built like an SEC team. Like I think they're an SEC type team here, and I think they're gonna pound Penn State in this game. I just don't think of the four, the most fraudulent to me, I still think is Penn State. So give me Notre Dame. Let's go Notre Dame third. Now let's go Notre Dame 30. Let's go Penn State 17.
Interesting. See, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying because I'm not a Penn State guy, like to this point. Right? I jumped off the bandwagon. It's well documented at this point. But it's interesting how the win over Georgia is changing everyone's mind on Notre Dame because for one, I don't think anyone thought this Georgia team was particularly that great. You know, I think they were a flawed team most of the season. And then playing with QB2, I don't know that we actually learned that much about Notre Dame. I think both of these teams are kind of in a position where they're going to get to the national championship, and I still don't necessarily know how good they are. But so I don't know. I think I just tend to trust James Franklin and Penn State more. They feel like the more battle tested one to me. So it's interesting for you to say Notre Dame's more battle tested because I think Penn State. I mean, granted, they didn't win many of those battles. But their schedule in the regular season, I think, was definitely more difficult than Notre Dame's.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame where they're at right now, and I came away very impressed with how they handled Georgia. And it's just the teams that handle Georgia like that, they're few and far between. And I think they have earned the benefit of the doubt because they just lead and they maintain their lead. They don't cough it up. They handle the lead well. If they go up 10-0 on Penn State, it's night. Like they just put teams away, man.
In fairness, Georgia had like 300 yards in that game, and Notre Dame had like 240. So it's like Notre Dame got kind of shut down in that game. It's like but
they scored 17 in a hurry. They do the other stuff well
for the touchdown, and then the sack, the one play touchdown. It's like that was Notre Dame.
But they force turnovers, and they do great things on special teams. That's part of their identity.
No, that's fair, but I think taking kick returns to the house is not a sustainable identity. Like, I mean, how many touchdowns does this guy have this year? Like 2.
He has 2.
Like, yeah, it's like
I mean, they don't happen very often. They're just really good at it, man.
Yeah,
and
but
he was good as a transfer from Marshall.
Not going to happen in this game.
Jeremiah Love ran 98 yards for a touchdown. How often are you going to see a 98-yard touchdown run?
But what did he? Yeah, and what did he do on the ground against Georgia? Like I think Penn
But what I'm
State.
saying is, like, maybe he didn't have to do it that game, but now they're like, all right, we need you again, Jeremiah Love.
Yeah.
So here's a 98-yard out of nowhere. So all I'm saying is, like, they don't have to like be sustainably great on offense. They just need those couple big game breakers, and then they can sit on it. There's not a better team of the four that can sit on you once you give them an advantage.
I personally think, and maybe it's me being a homer or whatever. I think that game was much more just absolute, like, just ineptness on Georgia's offensive side. Like, I think Georgia played an awful game offensively. And
I don't know, man. Your offensive line got pulverized by Notre Dame's defensive line.
No, and that's definitely a huge part of it. But it's like, even with that said, Georgia outgained Notre Dame in the game. It's like the two, like you're talking about, the two touchdowns in 30 seconds. They scored 23 points in the game. So it's like they're whatever that percentage is, 60% of their points came in a 30-second period at the end of the third quarter, at the end of the second quarter and the start of the third quarter. The rest of the game, Notre Dame's offense really didn't do anything against Georgia. And I think Penn State's defense, against a different competition, you can argue Penn State's defense was better than Georgia's all season long.
That's fair.
And they have their starting quarterback for this game, and both of those running backs. And their running game has definitely been better than Georgia's this season.
That's fair. I have some final two side questions here for you. One's broad and one is very niche, but Casey Keeler is the head coach at Temple now. And I was diving through some stuff because I was like, I recognize that name. He's the only guy who has won 2 FCS titles with 2 different schools. Temple's been awful, as you know, Matt Green. Like an awful, awful situation. And they're now, looks like they're zoning in on the Montana State OC, who they were undefeated until they lost in the national title game to North Dakota State here this week. But he might be the OC. Like, folks, Temple football, after like the Matt Rule, they've had some life every now and then, but we've joked about like maybe it's time to just move on from football, just do basketball, just zone in on that, maybe go back down the FCS ranks or something. It's not going well. Temple's been one of the worst FBS programs for years now. I'm just gonna go ahead and say, like, keep an eye on Temple next year. Like, Casey Keeler is a really good coach, and this is a really interesting hire and how they're going about it. But I thought this was interesting, was just like going through all the different coaches, because I like Tony Gibson's first staff here at Marshall, and I'm just going through a lot of staffs and what this all looks like. But I'm like, Temple's over here doing smart stuff here, and they're going to be pretty interesting, and Temple might be back to life here a little bit. Matt Green.
Yeah, I think that's an underrated way to go, is getting the guys that are elite at the lower levels. Like, yeah. I think me and you both said, not going to act like we knew what Indiana was going to do what they did this year, but I think when the Kurt Cignetti hire happened last year, we're like, this is a home run for someone like Indiana.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever Temple's got to do to make their program relevant.
65 years old, kind of the same. Kurt Cignetti was older and energized him and got him rolling. So I don't know, just don't be surprised if Temple is like bowling next year. I think people are gonna be like, whoa, Temple's back, and it's like, yeah, Temple hired really well. So I would not be surprised if Temple is one of the more surprising programs here in the next 2 years. So kudos to them. Final thing here, and we'll get out of here, Matt Green. Favorite transfer portal move across FBS to this point for you is who? Can't be a Georgia player.
I mean, probably the Branch brothers.
No, I can't Georgia. Do it. And you can't even do Branch over Noah Thomas? Come on.
I'm just saying, it's a 2-for-1 special. That's that the package deal is talked about a lot, but it rarely actually comes to fruition. I guess when they're brothers, it's a little different. But I mean, I don't know if it's my favorite. I think John Mateer is probably going to be one of the bigger impact guys. I'm not going to pretend to watch Washington State play a bunch this past year, but I think in terms of immediate impact quarterbacks, I think he's got to be near the top of the list. I'm not going to say it's my favorite because it's a rival of Georgia, but I think Eric Singleton to Auburn, like their receiving core next year is going to be stupid. Like if they can figure out the quarterback play, I think Auburn, you were hating on Andy and Ari's list last week, but I think Auburn could definitely be a dangerous team next year.
They could, but putting them in top 10 is just all right.
Yeah.
Come on. We can't do that.
If they were number 10 and he had Tennessee number 8, would you have said anything though?
Wait, say that again.
if he had Auburn at 10, but Tennessee was sitting up there at number 8, would you have said anything?
Yes, because
I think that's
it's
where
Jackson
it really
Arnold.
That's
I
where it
watched
really
Jackson
comes
Arnold.
from.
Jackson Arnold was not good this year. They're rolling the dice in year 3 with Jackson Arnold, man. Like, all right, put him in the top 10. We'll see. But I saw Jackson Arnold. Tennessee wrecked Jackson Arnold last year.
They landed another quarterback too, though, right?
Yeah, he's gonna be the kid from, I think he's from Buford, if I remember correctly, the Stanford quarterback. I think he went to Buford a couple of years ago. Is it Daniels? Something Daniels.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And then also the freshman Deuce Knight, who should be pretty interesting. I think that's an interesting one to me of the quarterbacks. I think Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, so they get to plug and play here. He was really good at Cal. So that, like, obviously Georgia was flirting with him a little bit, but I like Mendoza ultimately winding up in Indiana, and I think Indiana is just going to keep this thing rolling. So I'm glad they're not going to be a one and done here. Is just seeing what happened there. But I also love Mark Gronkowski, the South Dakota State quarterback who is transferring to Iowa for his last year of eligibility. He was really good with the Jackrabbits, so that could be fun. Like, I'm here for fun Iowa quarterback play, so that might be a possibility next year, which that could be interesting, right? And the final one, Rahul Faison from Utah State, who was really, really good for them. We saw what South Carolina looked like with Rocket Sanders this year when he was healthy, and Lenore Sellers, and there's a lot of preseason hype. Obviously, they're also in the top 10, but to go out and get a player like Faison, I think it's going to be pretty huge for them. So I think Faison's going to be a really good player. He's a senior and 4-star transfer. I think it was a must need for the Gamecocks to keep this thing running and to help Lenora Sellers out there in the backfield. So I don't know. I think that was a big one, but there's a lot of interesting portal movement here, Matt Green, and a lot of folks got a lot better here.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's far from over, sir.
I mean, it's not far from over. We're wrapping up here. Like
you still got these 4 teams in the semis. Like, those guys are gonna get in the portal. There's gonna be coaches. I don't know. Maybe the coaching carousel is over. I don't know, but there's gonna be different things that happen, and then the window opens again. I don't know. It's there's still gonna be things that happen. It's a wild sport we live in.
Absolutely. Matt Green, that's all I've got, my friend, and we'll check back in again in a couple days.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.